Good morning and welcome back to the Average Fan Podcast. My name is Sabri. It's a fairly quick video today. It's been a while since I've uploaded one. I just wanted to make sure I spoke about the Balogun red card controversy. So in case you're unaware, on Wednesday last week when playing Bosnia, the US team received a red card. It was Balogun that was sent off. The challenge itself, fairly controversial. Some people would say it's definitely a red card. Some people would say it's a bit soft and it definitely wasn't a red card. Either way, a red card was issued, which meant that the player was then going to serve a one-game ban, which would have taken him out of the last 16 game, which was against Belgium. But it did mean that the player was then going to serve a one-game ban, which has been the case across the tournament and just across World Cup tournaments in general. There's already been, I think, prior to that, I think 11 or 12 red cards had already been issued, and all of those players had served that one-game ban as a result of receiving a red card. And on the Wednesday evening, it was brought to Donald Trump's attention by Andrew Giuliani that one of the players was actually going to have to miss the following game. According to Trump, in a later statement, he'd said that he hadn't actually realised that a red card would actually mean you'd miss the following game. He assumed it was just purely the actual game that was being played where the player would have to miss that game. Upon hearing this, he then made 3 phone calls over the course of that day and the following day to FIFA President Infantino. Now, surely that's a huge red flag if the president of one of the countries that's playing within the tournament calls the FIFA president during the tournament. I think personally it's a conflict of interest if he's ringing for any reason. I don't think any of the politicians of any of the heads of states of any of the countries that are playing within the tournament should be contacting the FIFA president during the actual tournament itself. Like I say, it's just a conflict of interest because unless they print transcripts of the actual conversation, unless they have it in public so everyone can hear exactly what's been said, it just screams of potential corruption and, like I say, conflict of interest if conversations are being had in private. Now, Trump's had a statement on this several times since, and so's the FIFA president as well, as to exactly what was said during the conversation. And both parties confirmed that Trump had actually rang and asked for a review of the red card itself and what the disciplinary process would be based on that red card being given, which has never happened, as far as I'm aware, has never happened previously where a politician has contacted FIFA directly and asked for a review of a decision made on field. It's just typical of obviously the US and the sort of things you come to expect from particularly Donald Trump, weighing into things that ordinarily people would never even dream to have imagined. So in that respect, it sets a precedent, but it's a precedent that you would almost expect. The shocking thing is that whereas you think, okay, it's bad for Trump to do something like that, it's unacceptable. It's way more unacceptable for the FIFA president to, 1, accept the phone call, and then to 2, act on it as well. Because as soon as the call comes in, within a couple of days, I think it's by the Sunday, so by Sunday, which is a day before the game's supposed to be played against Belgium, a decision was made to not rescind the red card because as it stood, the rules didn't allow for any appeals process on that red card. So it's impossible for the red card to be rescinded based on the laws of the game. But what they used instead was Article 27, an obscure ruling within the FIFA rules that allows FIFA to basically do whatever they want. Even though there's rules in place, they have discretion as such to decide to change certain things, not changing the actual rules itself, but to act instead in a completely different direction to the rules. So what they allowed it to do was to suspend the actual suspension itself. So they haven't rescinded the red card. The red card still needs to be applied, but now at a later stage. So I think it was suspended for an entire year. Ridiculous thing there is that red card should have meant that the player would have missed the next game. But if you're suspending that red card, it means you're also suspending the player missing that next game, which means that advantage that the opposition team, Belgium in this case, should have had by not having one of their players play against them suddenly no longer exists. So it's as if the red card was never given in the first place, because really it doesn't matter that it applies at a later stage. It should have applied within the tournament, because otherwise it means it's an unfair advantage. You might as well do whatever you want. There's no rules apply then. You could have gone around kicking and having 4 or 5 players sent off, because if it has no consequence in the end, well, what's the point? What it also means is Belgium, who have spent the last 4 days planning their team preparations around a player missing, being absent from the US team, suddenly has to completely rethink its entire strategy going into that game. So it's an unfair advantage in so many ways, because they're going to have to rethink their prep. Suddenly the US team's got their star player back again. It's insane that something like this was allowed to happen. And I think the biggest amount of blame, I know a lot of people have said it's Donald Trump is obviously bad for making the phone call. And I think that is correct. But the worst thing is the fact that FIFA would allow the phone call to happen in the first place and then to actually do something about it. They could have easily, even if they took the phone call, they still could have just said, we disagree, unfortunately, it's not part of the rules and there's nothing we can do about it. But the fact that they've actually acted on it is incredible, because it just opens up a can of worms, really. It opens up Pandora's box, because if that can happen, well, what else? And what about the other 11 or 12 red cards that have come before it? It just so happened that the England-Mexico game was that day, and in the England game, obviously, Kwanzaa was sent off for, it's not a similar incident, but again, it's an incident where it's divided people on exactly whether or not that was definitely a red card. Myself, personally, I think the Kwanzaa was definitely a red card. He's gone in with his studs showing, he's off balance, he can't really control his body, and he's then slammed into the leg of the other player. So I think it's a red card, but there's definitely some people who would argue the other way round. And it's the same for the US, the Balogun red card as well, because some people are saying it's an absolute red card, there's no denying it, and other people are saying, no, it's not quite the same. It should be reviewed, that it shouldn't have been a red card in the first place. But because there isn't a review process or appeals process that they can actually apply to that, it's irrelevant. It's a red card, the decision's made on field, and that should be the end of it. But if they're going to review and bend the rules slightly for the Balogun red card, well, what about the England red card in that case? Because should we be able to get our politicians to ring them and also ask for a review and a reversal of the actual red card, a suspension of the suspension itself? Well, probably not, and we probably shouldn't be able to do that either. But there has been, like I say, 11 or 12 other red cards before that. And it was interesting to see the manager, Pochettino, in his press conference say, it's a great thing for football, because what it now means is we've now opened this avenue for other people to make appeals and possibly get their red cards overturned. But that would be cool if yours was the first red card in the tournament. But like I say, 11 previous or 12 previous red cards came before that. So it's an unfair advantage if it suddenly applies to you 12 or 13 red cards in. But what about the other people who've had to lose players in the group stages in the last 32? They didn't get this advantage that the US team had. So it does seem very unfair for that to be the case, and very silly for Pochettino to make a statement like that as well, when it clearly is an unfair advantage for your team. The other crazy thing is, because FIFA gave no explanation as exactly how they came to their conclusion, Belgium didn't even know how to appeal the decision. So the Belgium national team simply questioned FIFA's decision and said, can you just let us know exactly how you came to this conclusion? What's all the information we're going to need to build an appeal process? But rather than answering those simple questions and saying, this is the breakdown of how it happened, this is the outcome, this is how we've arrived at that outcome, they instead said, we're treating this request as an appeal itself. So they actually started an appeal process on behalf of the Belgium team, but they immediately rejected it within a matter of hours and said, you weren't party to the initial disciplinary proceedings, therefore it's inadmissible for you to start an appeal, which is crazy, because surely Donald Trump is also not party to the original disciplinary proceedings. So how's he able to have an input on what happened? And Belgium, who are on the receiving end of this, apparently are not party to the actual disciplinary process. It's crazy. It's then meant that there's a loophole that FIFA can then just simply deny the appeals process that they actually created on their behalf. So in the end, the US team were able to play Balogun, and fortunately for the sake of football, Belgium absolutely thrashed the US 4-1 in the end, and it's obviously meant that the US team have been eliminated. I do feel sorry slightly for the US team, because obviously they're getting backlash for this, as if it was them that actually created this whole mess in the first place, which by the sounds of it, it wasn't at all. It was Donald Trump sticking his oar in. It's also the FIFA president who has got involved and has done something that's completely unprecedented. And even the player himself, Balogun, is getting a lot of grief for obviously playing. But given the set of circumstances, if your manager is saying that you can play and FIFA saying you can play, you're probably going to play, because if you didn't and then the US team also lost, the amount of grief you'd get from the US supporters and obviously the media as well would be probably just as insane as it is if you play and won or lost. But it is a catch-22 because you're sort of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But the aftermath of that, I guess, is that what now for football? Because we're still in the middle of the tournament and there's still the possibility that something like this could still happen again. Like I said, England have had a player sent off. I really hope we don't put an appeals process in. But based on what's happened, we're well within our rights, surely, to question our outcome, the same as the US team have questioned their outcome. I also think if any other country had asked for this prior to that, imagine if Iran had asked for a review on a red card they received. There's no way that it would have happened. But if it had have, 100% that the US would have been saying they're cheating, it's unethical, it's immoral, that they're changing the rules, they're bending the rules. They would have called FIFA out outright, saying that they're complicit in allowing them to cheat, basically. But because the shoe's on the other foot, obviously that's not the case. If you remember right back at the beginning of the tournament, when Mexico played South Africa in the opener, there was 3 red cards in that game, one of which was a stonewall red card. The other 2 had questions as to whether or not it's a bit too harsh. Those players then had to miss games within the qualifying stage. South Africa went out in the end. They didn't actually qualify past the group stage. But imagine if they'd had 2 of their players that had been sent off available to them within the group stage. Would that have made a difference to their outcome of the group stages? Potentially they could have qualified if they'd had 2 players available to them in their next game. But we'll never know, and we shouldn't ever be able to know because it's just the rules. That's how it is. It's happened like this for all previous tournaments. It's happened for all the red cards up to the US game, and it should hopefully happen for all the red cards going forward, including the England red card for Kwanzaa. I think it really just boils down to the fact that Americans really don't understand football. It's nothing like any of the sports they play. I think what they fail to understand about football is it's full of jeopardy. This is what makes football amazing. We have relegations, we have promotions, something that literally doesn't exist in American sport. You see the American influence in some of the owners, the American owners of some of the Premier League teams who have tried to split away from the Premier League and create their own super leagues just to prevent there from being relegations and promotions. It's those sorts of attitudes that are attempting to kill what's so fantastic about football. It's the jeopardy. It's the fact that you think potentially you could be relegated. You could play amazingly well and be promoted into another league. Within the World Cup, it's the fact that you have the group stage you need to fight your way out of and get into the knockout stage. In the knockout stage, if the game ends in a draw, it goes to extra time. If still nobody scores in extra time, it goes to penalties. It's then decided by a spot kick as to who then progresses into the rest of the tournament. The whole game's full of jeopardy. Within any of that game, if you get a red card, you're sent off. You then can't play for the next game. If it's a really bad challenge, you can't play for 3 games. That could mean that you're losing your best player. That's happened to every team. It's happened to England so many times. We've had Beckham get a red card. We've had Rooney get red cards. It's happened to every other country where they've lost their key players for key games and they haven't been available to play. Gary Neville was saying on one of his podcasts that he was unavailable to play in one of the semi-finals or the finals of the Champions League, I think it was. Really crucial player to have on your team, but he's not available. And that's just how it is. United obviously would have had to completely rethink their squad and their tactics going forward because they had that player missing for that next game. But that's just how it is. That's what makes football so amazing. But if the rules don't apply and you constantly always have the best players available and there is no jeopardy, then it's no longer a competitive sport. It's more of a spectacle. It's no surprise that in America they have things like the Harlem Globetrotters. It's just a spectacle. It's not a real game. It has no consequence. It doesn't mean anything. Whether or not they win that game is irrelevant, but nothing like that really exists in football. And this is why for something like this to happen, it really questions the integrity of the game. Whether or not the initial decision to have a red card was fair or not is irrelevant because, like I say, we've all been in that scenario where something's gone against us. I mean, England have had so many things. The ball that crossed the line that was never given, Beckham being sent off, Rooney being sent off. We've all had things that have really impacted us. And when we look back, we could easily sit and say, we probably would have won the next game or we probably would have won that game if this wouldn't have gone against us. But that's just life. Every other team has got similar things that they could say. But that's just what makes it consistent and fair across the board. Because even though the actual decision might not have been fair, it's the fact that it's the same blanket thing that applies to everyone. Everyone gets a red card, which then means they all have to miss a player the following game. But I've seen loads of US supporters who've said, oh, we need to change this rule, we need to change this. You're never going to understand football and appreciate it like we do if that's your attitude. That it's like the kid that says, oh, that's my football, I'm taking it home. If you're not playing the way I want to play, you should be changing, you should be adapting to football. It's been absolutely fine for decades and decades. All these other countries have never had an issue with this. You're the newest country to be one of the newest countries to be joining this sport, and suddenly you seem to have a problem with it. It's so mardiness, isn't it? That's the best way to describe it. If it's not working for you, let's kick up a fuss and try and change the rules just because it doesn't suit us. And I'm so disappointed that the FIFA president has allowed this to happen. I really don't think he should continue in his role. Already there was questions about his ethics and morals, very questionable decisions being made, giving Donald Trump the Peace Prize, a completely made up thing. But I guess we just need to see what happens now going forward. Best case scenario happen, I guess. US team has been eliminated, but there has been some other questionable things happen since. The Argentina game was yesterday. Egypt were knocked out. They were 2-0 up and somehow managed to lose 3-2. They had a disallowed goal, which was very questionable. Argentina then scored a goal, which had a very similar incident occur just before the goal itself, which was never reviewed by VAR, whereas the Egypt goal immediately had a VAR check and was chalked off for a foul leading up to the goal itself, which unfortunately, because there's been so many incidences already within this tournament, specifically the US Balogun red card incident, which would make people think, well, is this a correct decision? Is there corruption afoot? You can't help but feel that are Egypt being treated fairly here, because it doesn't feel that way. And had these other incidences not occurred, you couldn't point your finger that way and say, I think there's something dodgy going on. But because there has been previous incidences, it's so easy now for it. Like I say, it's open Pandora's box. Every time there's a decision that's a bit questionable, immediately people say FIFA's cheating, FIFA's trying to help one team over another. Even when Egypt scored their goals, there's a video of Infantino looking absolutely gutted that Argentina have now conceded another goal. And there's already been a few instances where going into the tournament, Ronaldo had received a red card and received a 3-game ban. He served one of the 3 games in the lead up to the tournament itself, but going into the tournament, FIFA decided to suspend the remaining 2 games for a year for him as well. It did mean that he was able to play in the group stages of the tournament, which, I mean, fortunately for the other teams, Portugal were terrible anyway, and Ronaldo was pretty poor anyway. So it didn't really make a huge deal of difference, but it was still unfair. And then there's been several occasions where Messi seems to have had some favourable decisions go his way, or Argentina, in general. But it just leaves a real stain now on the tournament and some of the decisions being made. It means everything has to be questioned. It means things like the England red card potentially should be reviewed. It shouldn't just be one rule for them and one rule for us, which it definitely seems to be the case. I've waffled on for quite a while. I did hope for this to be a fairly quick video, but there is quite a bit to talk about. I mean, the main points are, I really don't think FIFA should have taken the phone call. They definitely shouldn't have acted upon it. They should have just stuck to the rules. I think it's a conflict of interest to be receiving phone calls from any of the politicians or prime ministers, presidents. And I'm really glad that the US team lost in the end and were knocked out. And I just think it's a ridiculous thing for Pochettino to say that it's opening up a loophole for teams and what a great thing it is for football when you were the 12th or 13th person to have a red card for your team. So it wasn't fair at all. It's not great for football because it means the previous red cards before you weren't fairly applied in that case. But at least the US team's knocked out. England have got through to the quarterfinals. Unfortunately, Argentina have also got through to the quarterfinals. So there is a possibility and the chance that we might play them in the semi-finals if we beat Norway. But I'll be back on the next video and hopefully break down analysis of the previous England game and expectations and predictions for the game against Norway.